What is going on, guys, and welcome to a brand new video. Today we're going to be talking about why Tiny has a 47.02% win rate. This hero has definitely fallen off grace. He hasn't been meta in a pretty long time, and it does make me feel quite sad as this is one of my favorite mid laners to play. But right now in the current meta, he just really doesn't have a place. You could definitely play him here and there as a very situational mid. There's just a lot better options right now in the meta for you to be playing mid rather than playing Tiny. I feel like Tiny's just way too slow. The days where Tiny was running around the map making a ton of space with just the blink dagger and getting a ton of pickoffs, I think those days are kind of over. I think Tiny needs a pretty decent buff in order for him to be meta again, and just right now he just doesn't feel great to be playing. He's just overall very slow. Let me know in the comment section below if you guys are Tiny players. What do you guys think about Tiny in the current meta right now? I think the rise in items like Pavise, which builds into Solar Crest, and also items like Yule Scepter, items like Force Staff, like these are all big issues for Tiny, and honestly it can become a little bit of a problem if a team is going for Pavise. Honestly, a lot of problems with this hero is that he just doesn't do enough damage with this combo anymore. His toss avalanche doesn't do nearly as much as it did before, and that's a really big issue because heroes are tankier now. There's no longer very squishy supports that you can easily burst with your combo anymore. These heroes who build Pavise, you're absorbing 300 damage, and it's a pretty popular item. It's picked by most supports, especially position 5s. It can become a really big problem for you guys to be able to go up against an item like that because most of the damage you're going to be doing in the early game is going to get soaked, and 300 damage is no joke. That's a pretty nice block, and it could be the difference of Tiny getting the kill or overcommitting and definitely dying, because once your combo is done, you definitely don't have a whole lot to offer. And that is another big issue where if you're able to get in and burst the target and get out, you're definitely going to be winning. You're going to be ahead. But the problem is if you go in and you burst the support and then you have nothing in the tank, you're definitely going to die, or at least you're going to be in a really tight spot, and you're going to need your team to commit a lot of resources to be helping you out. Now I'm going to be breaking down the best builds on Tiny right now. You can either go for treads or phase boots. That's definitely up to you. Then you go for a blink dagger, echo saber, conda, and then you can go back for the eggs and the data list. These item builds are typically the most meta right now. I think conda is pretty meme right now. I have seen quite a few players building that. It can definitely work. It's not like it's terrible or anything, but it's nothing crazy. I think if you have harpoon and you have conda and an AC and maybe a moon shard and things like that, and you're in the late game, yes, that can do a ton of damage, especially if you're getting that crit plus your Aghanim Scepter. But that's talking in the ultra late game. That's when you have all your items, you are 6-slotted Tiny, and you are hitting for a ton. But meanwhile, you are not going to be having that much farm. This hero can still farm quite well. He doesn't farm slow, but tree is just not as great. So you need to buy your shard so you can actually become right-click Tiny, because in the mid to late game, your abilities are not going to do as much. You're not going to be able to burst as many people, and you're going to start having damage issues. So that's when you start becoming a right-click core, and that could definitely be a problem if you are severely underfarmed in a really tough Tiny game. So definitely keep that in mind, that you should farm a little bit more and go for plays. Definitely go for plays. Tiny is still a great roamer, but he's just not as great as he was before. He's not at his full peak power potential. Now I'm going to be breaking up some of his best and worst matchups. So Tiny is typically good up against heroes like Puck, Phantom Assassin, Naga Siren, Morphling. These types of heroes, you can easily jump them and burst them, especially a Morphling that's unsuspecting that you are nearby, especially if you smoke up with your team. You can easily Tiny Toss, Avalanche, and kill him, and he's definitely gonna die. It's just very hard for Morphling to get away. But if he does know you're coming, he can just Strength Morph, and pretty much your gank is gonna be absolutely useless. Again, with heroes like Phantom Assassin and Puck, if you're able to blink and silence them, I have seen some Bloodthorn builds with Conda. They are definitely quite strong. They just require so much farm for you to be able to hit that power potential, but you are pretty good against Puck. You're good against him in the lane. You're also good against him in the mid to late game as well. It's just a pretty good matchup for you as a Tiny. But some of your bad matchups are Necrophos, Viper, Pango, Dragonite. These heroes are pretty popular in the meta. Necro not so much, but Viper is pretty popular. Pango and Dragonite definitely are. And these are mid laners that you're going to be running into quite significantly. So you should definitely keep that in mind, because when you're playing up against a Viper, you are not going to have a lane. It's going to be pretty tough unless you get a really nice toss back onto your tower and you can avalanche them, and you can get a pretty free pick off like that. But most of the time, if you're playing up against a good mid laner, they're not going to give you the opportunity for you to toss them back into the tower, and you're going to have a lot of issues. And a farming Tiny in the jungle is definitely not very successful. you have a lot of mana issues in the early game, so you might have to go back for mana boots just to be able to sustain your avalanche in terms of farming creep camps. And you should definitely stack for yourself. I definitely recommend that. I see a lot of tiny players not putting a lot of priority on stacking. Once you max avalanche, you can easily take big creep camps. You can take ancient stacks as well with your tree toss. So keep an eye out for that and make sure you guys are stacking if your support doesn't want to stack for you. If they do, that's great. You're going to take some good stacks, especially if you need to recover. Definitely very important for playing tiny. And just play with your team. Try and play with a very active lineup. Don't try and play mid tiny with a very greedy lineup who just wants to stay at AFK farm the rest of the game. Try to not do that, as you're not going to have a really good game. Tiny depends on ganking around the map, so play it with heroes like Bounty Hunter, Grimstroke, Dark Willow, these types of heroes that want to be roaming around the map, like a Pudge, a Tusk. These heroes are going to benefit you quite heavily as they want to be active around the map, other than heroes that just want to sit down and farm, and the later the game goes, the better it is for them. Because the later the game goes, it is good for tiny to a certain extent because you scale pretty well, but the problem is you don't benefit a lot from sitting in the jungle. It is quite slow for you to jungle, and you benefit more from going in and getting as many kills as possible. That way you can get a faster blink timing, and you can get your Echo Saber, and you can eventually get Conda, which is a pretty big power spike for you. Let me know in the comment section below, what do you guys think about Tiny in the current meta? I definitely think he needs a buff to be meta again. He can be played very situationally. He could still burst quite a few targets, but the fact that supports are just much tankier, and the fact that they like building bracers nowadays and just very tanky items in general, it's very tough for the Tiny to be bursting most heroes right now in the meta. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, a like would be much appreciated. I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching.